Hello, today we're going to be taking a look at section 3.3 and we're going to be talking about conversions between the metric and non-metric systems. We are going to be specifically looking at the metric system and the US system today. Now before we talk about these conversions, I want you to keep in mind that we will be discussing a lot of the same strategies that we were using in the last section when we were only looking at metric conversions. And we're going to look at it from the dimensional analysis approach. Now before we look at some examples, let's take a look at some of the conversion factors we're going to be using today. This table is in your textbook on page 111. It's table 3.2, and it shows some of the common conversions that we are going to be using as we look at some problems today. Now notice that they are divided into the three categories. We have distance, we have volume, and we have weight or mass. Now some of the conversions you'll notice are within the US system. So for example, 12 inches equals 1 foot. That's one that we're all familiar with. Others are between the metric and the US system. So for example, 0.91 meters is equal to 1 yard. So the first thing I want to do is kind of highlight the ones that compare between systems. So that's one there. Another one that's between the two systems in the distance category here is this last one. 1.61 kilometers is equal to 1 mile. Now notice volume has an awful lot of conversion factors, but if you look carefully, these first several we've looked at a little bit before. These are all the conversion factors that deal with different sizes in the American system. So we have tablespoons and fluid ounces. We have fluid ounces in a cup. Cups go to pints. We have pints going to quarts, we have quarts going to gallons. Those are some of the ones we are more familiar with. But then if you notice this next one here, 3.79 liters equals 1 gallon. I'm going to mark this one again because that's a relationship between the metric and the US system. Right below it is the other one. 1 liter is equal to 1.06 quarts. There's another relationship. Another one that's a relationship between the systems that we commonly use is the milliliters to 1 fluid ounce, and we'll be using that one today as well. And finally, this is one you will also sometimes use. 1 centimeters cubed is equal to 1 milliliter, and that's again a relationship between the systems. So there's a few more relationships that you can pull from when converting between the systems in the volume section. Now the weight and mass one has again fewer choices to work from, but there are again some that cross over the two systems. For example, 2,200 pounds is equal to 1 metric ton, and 2.2 pounds is equal to 1 kilogram. So again, I've highlighted the ones that cross over so we can more quickly find those as we need to in looking at some examples. So now let's take a look at a couple of examples, and I'll be going back and forth between these two pages a little bit. So the first example I'd like to take a look at is the following. I would like to convert 60 pounds to a certain number of kilograms. Now, as we're looking at this first example, there's a couple of things that you want to zero in on. First of all, you should ask yourself, is this a conversion of distance, volume, or weight? And so if we talk about pounds and kilograms, you want to make sure that for this problem you are thinking weight. Now we want to take a look at our chart and see what we might find here to help us. So here is the list of conversions that we have for weight and mass. So if I look at the list, I am going between the US system and the metric system, so I want to look at my two starred ones. Which one would be most helpful here? Well, it looks like this last one would be most helpful. That I know that I have 2.2 pounds and that equals 1 kilogram. That is an exact relationship that will help me with this particular problem. So I'm going to start this one just like I did in the last section. I'm going to start with 60 pounds over 1. Again, write it as a fraction. And I'm going to multiply it. And now I have to use this relationship I have over here. And I have to write it as a ratio so that my pounds cancel. So if I'm thinking of it as a ratio, the pounds, in order to cancel, need to go on the bottom. So I'm going to have 2.2 pounds, and on the top is 1 kilogram. So what is that going to equal? Well, notice that my pounds do cancel, which is what I wanted to have happen. And on top, I have 60. On the bottom, in terms of numbers, I have 2.2, and my label that's left is the kilograms. And so I have 60 divided by 2.2 kilograms. Now, of course, we want to compute that out, but by putting the numbers together, it makes it a little bit easier. Now, this isn't an exact measure, so we're going to end up with approximately 27.27 kilograms for our answer on this one. And again, depending on the amount of accuracy we would want, that may determine how we would choose to round that problem. So this one was a very straightforward conversion because we could find a relationship directly in the table. The next one's going to be just a little bit more difficult to show you how all of this can play together. So the next example I'd like to do is I would like to convert 4 quarts to a certain number of milliliters. Okay, so just like with the last problem, I want to first think, what unit of measure am I in? Am I talking distance? Am I talking volume? Am I talking weight? So quarts and milliliters, those are things that I measure volume with. So as I look at my chart, I'm going to want to be looking here at some relationships in the volume section of the chart. Now the volume is quite a bit larger list of things than we had for the mass. So I'm going to try to put it off to the side here so we can look at it as we are working through this problem and see if we can figure out what pieces we might need to use. So as in the previous problem, I'm going to start with 4 quarts over 1, and I want to be able to transfer those quarts into milliliters. Now there's a couple places that I can start, and often where I like to start is I recognize here that I'm going from the US system to the metric system. So which one of the 4 starred relationships might help me there? Well, the most obvious one has milliliters already in it. I'm trying to go to milliliters. So I'm going to keep in mind that, and make myself a note here, that 29.9 milliliters is equal to 1 fluid ounce. Now, the fluid ounce is again part of the US system. So the rest of the work that I'm going to need to do here is going to involve trying to translate my quarts into fluid ounces. So if we take a look at our chart here, we might want to think of how can we break a quart down. Well, 4 quarts is equal to 1 gallon. Well, I could use that, but gallons are larger than what I want to do. Fluid ounces are actually smaller. So if I keep looking, I find this one right here. 4 cups is equal to 1 quart. Cups are smaller than quarts. That helps. So let's use that relationship. So I can multiply this. Now again, I want to get rid of quarts, so that means I'm going to put 1 quart on the bottom, and I'm going to put 4 cups on the top. So there's 4 cups in 1 quart. That's going to allow me to eliminate quarts as my label. But I'm not there yet. I still have some more work to do. So now I need to change cups into something smaller. Well, let's see. We used 4 cups into 1 quart. 2 cups, well, a pint is actually larger than a cup. That's not going to work. But wait a minute. Here I have 8 fluid ounces is equal to 1 cup. That works. That's going to get me the fluid ounces that I want. So now I can multiply this. Now what is it I want to get rid of? I want to get rid of the cup. So I'm going to put my 1 cup on the bottom, and on top is my 8 fluid ounces. Okay, so now my cups are canceling, and I can take away my chart because my last relationship that I need here is my note right over here. I know that 29.9 milliliters is equal to 1 fluid ounce. So I add that into my calculation. So I know I want to get rid of the fluid ounces, so that means my 1 fluid ounce goes on the bottom with my 29.9 milliliters on top. So let's see here. Again, fluid ounces cancels with the fluid ounces. So all the labels are gone except for the one I want, which is my milliliters. That's what I was trying to translate it to. Now it becomes a matter of just looking at what's left in this particular expression that needs to be combined. So I have a 4 times a 4 times an 8 times a 29.9 milliliters. And so what happens here is I end up needing to compute that value right there. So if I multiply this all out, you will find that you will end up getting exactly 3,827.2 milliliters. And there is my final answer on that one. So there's 2 examples that relate with the conversions between the metric and the non-metric systems. Now the first one I did was very straightforward. The second one involved multiple steps. Now it's also possible that when you work them, you might actually come up with some different steps based on the relationships you choose to use. But remember that your key with all of these is that you want to make sure that all the units reduce to the units you want to convert to. So if you keep that in mind, that will help you with this process immensely. Now there's one last thing I want to mention with the conversion table that I didn't look at earlier. So let me go back and take a look at this table. Now again, you might want to highlight for yourself the ones that have the conversions between the metric and the U.S. system. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is both volume and weight use ounces in it. But ounces are just ounces when we talk about weight. When we talk about volume, we always use fluid ounce, or FL is the abbreviation with an OZ. And so you'll always be able to tell that difference between weight and volume, because volume will use fluid ounce. So that's one relationship I wanted to make sure that I highlighted. So I hope this will help you with the assignment that you have for today, and we'll talk about this more next week.